We can learn a lot from the Oscars. The 2021 Oscars show how we try to adapt to lockdown restrictions. The 1998 Oscars show how much one film can take the world by storm. The 1973 Oscars show a period of societal change and hot-button issues of the time. And so I wondered, what can I learn from watching the first Oscars? Or at least the first televised Oscars. Although television had been around since 1927, this was the first ceremony to be televised 25 years later. Why is that? Well, the Academy felt they were above the small box in your living room, and they didn't want to stoop down to such a low level. As Bob Hope put it,
television, that's where movies go when they die.
But they were in financial ruin, and it was a way to hold the ceremony at all. After backers stopped funding the program, the Academy turned to RCA, the Radio Corporation of America. They agreed to provide $100,000 so they could have segments of the ceremony devoted to teaching people at home how to use their radios and television sets. The Academy reluctantly agreed, and the ceremony was broadcast on NBC to 33 million viewers. But what exactly did I learn from watching the 2-hour show? Which films were the big winners, and which of those have stood the test of time? Why did John Wayne give 2 acceptance speeches despite not winning a single award? How did Bob Hope respond to James Stewart making fun of him in front of 30 million people? And how was The Bad and the Beautiful the winner of 5 awards, yet wasn't nominated for Best Picture? Strap in, because I'm going to take you on a journey through the night. We'll see every major moment and contextualize the drama surrounding it. Along the way, I'll also be recommending 5 hidden gems you've probably never heard of, but which deserve to be seen and considered among the best films of all time. Bob Hope starts the ceremony with a barrage of jokes that can best be described as mean-spirited. There are always debates on whether or not Oscar hosts add to the night, and while I ultimately think Hope does a good job tonight, his style of humor is certainly not for everyone.
TV as that furniture that stares back. I've never seen so many Cadillacs, mink coats, diamonds, emeralds, rubies, ermine wraps. It looks like a PTA meeting in Texas.
And so, as we work our way towards the first awards, they could not have come at a better time. The first 2 awards of the night both deal with costumes. While we still have an award for Best Costume Design today, this award was split in 1953. Best Costume Design for a black and white film and Best for a film in color. This was only the 5th Academy Awards that costume design was even recognized, and as nearly half of films being released were still in black and white, splitting the award into 2 subcategories made sense. Ginger Rogers announces first the black and white nominees. One notable film is Sudden Fear, a thriller involving Joan Crawford as she learns her new husband may have had ulterior motives in marrying her. Edith Head was nominated for Carrie, which may as well have been out of obligation as it was for achievement. Head is perhaps Hollywood's most famous costume designer, having won 8 Academy Awards in her career, making her the woman who has won the most golden statues. Carrie's costumes are fine, but they aren't even Edith Head's best work this year. But neither of these films won. The first award of the night went to Helen Rose for her work on The Bad and the Beautiful. The Bad and the Beautiful has aged like fine wine. It's a film that deals with the poison running deep within the film industry. A movie on movies, but one that does not argue filmmaking is an art form above any other. It's not holier than thou. Kirk Douglas plays a murderous producer with refined strain and subtleties, and this is one example of something we still see today. When a film is an awards contender, it may as well win all of the awards. But for some reason, The Bad and the Beautiful was not nominated for Best Picture. Also notable is Helen Rose's acceptance of the Oscar. There's no acceptance speech. One of the major critiques of the ceremonies of recent years have been its length, and although I disagree with cutting speeches entirely, it's staggering to see how swiftly Rogers moves from one award to the next. The color awards are interesting because they show us just how close-knit Hollywood was at the time. With A Song in My Heart was nominated with the costumes done by Charles Lemaire. He was also nominated in the black and white category for My Cousin Rachel, a film he costumed alongside Dorothy Jenkins. She's nominated again too, this time for her work on The Greatest Show on Earth. She's one of 3 costume designers recognized, the others being Miles White and Edith Head. Remember her from Carrie? The Greatest Show on Earth loses the Oscar here, but it's notable as its Best Picture nominee 1 out of 5. There's also The Merry Widow, where Helen Rose of The Bad and the Beautiful was nominated alongside Giles Steele. This was Steele's final nomination of his career, and it came posthumously. He had died abruptly just 2 months earlier at the age of 43. The winner of this award, though, was Marcel Vertet for his work on Moulin Rouge, a musical biopic on the life of Henri de Toulouse-Lautrec. The film bears little in common with the 2001 remake, although they both share one thing in common, being nominated for Best Picture. Moulin Rouge is Best Picture nominee 2 of 5. For now, the Academy moved right along to documentary achievement. And here's where things get confusing. There are 2 categories here, Best Short Documentary and Best Documentary Feature. 4 films were nominated for Best Short Documentary, and of the 2 I was able to watch, neither was a documentary at all. The winner was Neighbors, a surrealist dark comedy about a property dispute involving a flower. It was really impressive, and it's my first of 5 hidden gem recommendations. Neighbors employs stop-motion photography on live-action subjects, creating a unique visual look that perfectly suits the absurdity of the subject matter. The film was decidedly anti-war, and it created a big stir at the time, with many deeming the film too violent for American audiences. To director Norman McLean's horror, he was asked to recut the film if he wanted it to be eligible for Oscars. He did so, removing the scenes of violence and ultimately the cohesive tissue. Still, the picture won, despite not being a documentary at all. It beats out another non-documentary called Man Alive, a short about a man who ignores his signs of cancer, refusing to get screened as a way to save money. The short was rather pertinent at the time and ultimately still pretty valuable today. However, to call it a documentary would be facetious, and it's animated on top of that, yet it's ultimately missing from the animated short category. The documentary feature is somewhat controversial too. 3 films were nominated here: Navajo, Hoaxers, and The Sea Around Us. Of these 3, only one is a documentary. First, we have Navajo, a film about a Navajo boy forcibly converted away from his Navajo lifestyle. Although well-meaning, it isn't very interesting and entirely fictitious. Hoaxers was an anti-communism propaganda piece that's all at once horribly flawed, not a documentary, and not even a feature film, clocking in at only 36 minutes. The rules for feature categories at the Academy Awards state that a film must be more than 40 minutes to qualify for feature status, and so Hoaxer's inclusion here makes about as much sense as some of the points it tries to make. Luckily, the winner of the category is The Sea Around Us, the only film here really worth watching today. It's a true feature-length documentary, and it's a fascinating time capsule. The Sea Around Us is a nature film shot in grainy Technicolor and full of interesting and outdated theories on some of the ocean's mysteries. The work also ends on a surprising note. It theorizes that the glaciers are melting and the oceans rising. The Sea Around Us not only discusses climate change, but it posits that it could lead to the death of us all. While this may be a big deal today, it meant next to nothing at the audiences at the time, who wouldn't have started hearing about climate change until decades later.
Melting of all these glaciers, coupled with the drastic upheaval of the land masses of the globe, might one day drown more than half the earth.
What is the fate of the world? Is this the end?
The legendary director Frank Capra announces the next award, Film Editing. In typical years, the Best Editing Award is a pretty good indicator for what may win Best Picture. In fact, 2 in every 3 years sees the best edited film taking home the top prize. So, what won this year? It wasn't Moulin Rouge or The Greatest Show on Earth, although both were nominated. One odd choice of a nomination is Flat Top, the only nomination the film got. It's a film so similar to Top Gun that one can't help but think the filmmakers took inspiration. It even boasts genuine aerial photography and was shot atop a real naval aircraft carrier. Where it is lacking, though, is subtext. The 4th nominee was Come Back, Little Sheba, which is firmly one of my favorite films of the night. It follows a recovering alcoholic man and his much older wife, who deals with loneliness and depression as her husband begins to fall for their attractive new lodger. This is phenomenal and so heartbreaking, and it's my second of 5 hidden gem recommendations. But it did not win. That honor would go to Best Picture nominee 3 of 5, a little western called High Noon. High Noon is perhaps the most infamous film to be released in 1952. It's a western that takes place in real time following a group of outlaws who wreak havoc on a small town, and Gary Cooper's attempts to stop them. It is a good old-fashioned good versus evil film, but it is maybe my favorite film of the year. This was its first nomination of the night, but it's the first of 7 total, making it the night's biggest contender. Bill Clinton loved the film, screening it a record 17 times at the White House. Ronald Reagan loved it too, considering it his favorite film of all time. John Wayne and Howard Hawks hated it, though Wayne's comments will become especially hypocritical later in the night. For now, the excitement was in the air. High Noon had bested 2 other Best Picture nominees so far, and they were its biggest competition. But what about Best Picture nominees 4 and 5? Where are their nominations? And why was The Bad and the Beautiful excluded from the top category? By this point, the ceremony was really starting to find its groove. Bob Hope had worked off the nerves, and his excitement was palpable in introducing the next awards. Joan Fontaine and James Stewart, reading Best Art and Set Direction. Today, the award is known as Best Production Design, but like many awards this night, there were 2 categories, one for black and white and one for color. There were more repeat nominations here as the true powerhouses of the night are starting to pull ahead. For the Black and White Award, we see repeat noms for Carrie, The Bad and the Beautiful, and My Cousin Rachel. The Bad and the Beautiful won the award. 2 new films were nominated. One was Viva Zapata, its first of 5 nominations of the night. Directed by Elia Kazan and starring Marlon Brando as the titular Zapata, this film was highly indicative of the next generation of film, and it was a stark portrayal of an inherently un-American story. Of its 5 nominations, it will only win once. The last nominee here is Rashomon, one of the only foreign language films to be nominated the entire night. The film Forbidden Games will receive an honorary foreign language Oscar, an award which Rashomon had received the year prior. The Academy's treatment of foreign films leaves much to be desired, but I was pleasantly surprised to see it nominated here. Rashomon is a look at a climactic event through the lens of 4 different witnesses. It's powerful, it demystifies the justice system, and questions how we recall facts, and whether finding the truth is ever possible. Another heavy recommendation if you've never seen it. But The Bad and the Beautiful wins its second deserved award of the night. On the color side of the spectrum, there were 3 more repeated nominations: Moulin Rouge, Hans Christian Andersen, and The Merry Widow. The win would again go to Moulin Rouge. I enjoyed Hans Christian Andersen, but my 2 favorite films nominated here are the 2 I've yet to discuss. The first is The Snows of Kilimanjaro, an epic adventure film based on an Ernest Hemingway story of the same name. It was the 3rd highest grossing film of the year and follows Gregory Peck as he recounts his life following an infection while on an African safari. It was shot on location in Kenya and Egypt, and it certainly shows. The production design is stunning, and as a huge Gregory Peck fan, he's definitely well utilized. This is my 3rd hidden gem of recommendation, if only for the cinematography and on-location shooting. The last nomination went to The Quiet Man, a film directed by John Ford and starring John Wayne. As we'll see later, it will make history in the Best Director award. It's also Best Picture nominee 4 of 5. For now, Moulin Rouge gets another win, and a fun moment between Bob Hope and James Stewart is exchanged. Hope keeps Stewart on stage, riffing with him about how he wants an Oscar. Stewart and Hope take turns poking fun at each other, with Stewart showing a rare look at his comedic side. Moments like these make this recorded ceremony an invaluable time capsule, and they serve a more natural break from the awards than the stilted commercials that were contractually included.
You never have been nominated, have you, Bob?
No, I don't know how they missed me, but they did.
But I don't know, Jimmy, it seems like somehow... Of course, there was a rumor going around last year that I might win an Oscar, but nobody paid any attention to it, so I stopped spreading it. But it seems to me, Jimmy, that they just give awards like for dramatic pictures and musical epics, while I, of course, do comedy. Really?
I'll run through these next 4 awards rather quickly, as all were won by films nominated in 1 or 2 categories only. Best Sound went to Breaking the Sound Barrier. For some reason, sound awards used to be awarded to the studios rather than the technicians, a decision that is equal parts disrespectful and unbecoming. Breaking the Sound Barrier is fine. It's a film by David Lean and follows attempts by test pilots to break the sound barrier. It seemed destined to win the award. Now, the short films. There are 3 categories for shorts in 1952. Best Short Subject Cartoons, Live Action 1 Reel, and Live Action 2 Reel. Johann Mouse wins Best Animated Short Film, which was odd as I found it to be a rather unremarkable Tom and Jerry short. In fact, it wasn't even a very good Tom and Jerry short, as it is more a play on Johann Strauss than anything else. However, I was less confused when I saw that this was apparently the 7th Oscar for a Tom and Jerry short. As much as I liked The Cat and Mouse, I think this was arguably the weakest of the 5 nominees. Although nothing blew me away, my personal favorite was The Romance of Transportation in Canada, a humorous look at Canada's innovations in transportation over the preceding centuries. Next were Best Short Subject 1 Reel and 2 Reel. This is essentially Best Short Film under 15 minutes and Best Short Film between 15 and 40 minutes, a distinction that feels fairly important and which is confusing why they've gotten rid of it in the decades since. I was only able to watch 3 of the 5 nominees for Best Short 1 Reel, but the best was easily Neighbors, the non-documentary that won Best Short Documentary earlier in the night. Of all 16 shorts to be nominated, Neighbors is my highest recommendation. The Oscar was won by Light in the Window, a profile of the painter Johannes Vermeer, which seems to be lost to time. What isn't lost to time is the winner of the 2 Reel category, Disney's Waterbirds. Oddly, Waterbirds is a documentary that won the short category, which is doubly confusing considering it wasn't as though the documentary category was too crowded. Neighbors was there, one of 3 nominations, and it wasn't a doc at all. Waterbirds was fine, a sort of travelogue showing, well, waterbirds, if you can believe it. But to keep the audience from guessing too much, Teresa Wright is up next, presenting Cinematography, in perhaps the strangest lineup of the night. Like earlier categories, Cinematography awards are divided between color films and those without. For the black and white category, The Big Sky is nominated its first time. In Sudden Fear, My Cousin Rachel, the fake documentary Navajo, and The Bad and the Beautiful are all nominated again, with The Bad and the Beautiful winning. At times, it seems like these nominations are drawn at random, with huge favorites like High Noon being completely absent from the nomination entirely. For color, we get another nomination for The Snows of Kilimanjaro, another for Hans Christian Andersen, another for The Quiet Man, which ends up taking a well-deserved win, and new nominations for 2 films. One is $1 Million Mermaid, an interesting biopic on the life of Annette Kellerman, who made headlines for, among other things, wearing a one-piece swimsuit deemed too revealing. The film is fine, but what's really worth talking about is the final nominee, Ivanhoe. Ivanhoe follows the story of the famous novel of the same name. It takes place in the universe of Robin Hood and features heavily characters like Prince John. It was directed by Richard Thorpe and starring Robert Taylor, the first film in a trilogy the duo made together. And as long as we're listing off trivia for the film, it's Best Picture nominee number 5. I think it's finally time we talk about the big award of the night. Best Picture, an award so hotly contested some years that it feels so strange to be so undervalued this year. Let's look at the numbers and try and figure out why certain films were nominated over others. High Noon, Moulin Rouge, and The Quiet Man were all nominated 7 times tonight, more than any other film. The Bad and the Beautiful was nominated 6 times, winning 5 of them. Most notably, this is the most amount of wins ever for a film that wasn't even nominated for Best Picture. Unfortunately, this is a mystery that seems to be unsolved still, as all of my attempts at research came up short. One possible theory is that the film was so anti-Hollywood that it was unliked by the studio executives, but that seems unlikely to me. The film was a hit, and after all, it was nominated 6 times. Another theory is that MGM focused their Best Picture efforts on Ivanhoe, but Ivanhoe was not particularly competitive for the award, and United Artists had 2 horses in the race with both Moulin Rouge and High Noon. But its exclusion seems even more confusing when we take a look at how weak the lineup is on the whole. There's High Noon, a great film by all accounts and incredibly deserving. The Greatest Show on Earth, despite it being considered overlong and excessive, was directed by C.B. DeMille, one of Hollywood's most acclaimed directors, and a promising look at just how epic the future of films could be. They were onto something too. DeMille's follow-up was The 10 Commandments. The Quiet Man was perhaps nominated for similar reasons. Just as DeMille was a highly respected filmmaker, so too was John Ford. And with this being another Wayne and Ford collaboration, the excitement of the move could have been enough to secure a nomination. But what about Moulin Rouge? It did well in the box office, but it was far from the year's biggest hit. Its color cinematography was praised at the time, but as we just saw, it was absent from that award. And Ivanhoe? MGM focused the majority of their campaigning on The Bad and the Beautiful. So where did this surprise nomination come from? The film did well financially, but several films made more, including The Greatest Show on Earth and The Snows of Kilimanjaro. Unfortunately, the Oscars are nearly impossible to explain sometimes. The Academy consisted of only around 200 people in 1952, and much of what was and was not nominated came down simply to which hands were in which pies. And as satisfying as it would be to explain the decisions of the night, there's no easy way to do so. But having seen everything here, I can throw my own opinion into the mix. Without question, my favorite of the 5 nominees is the remarkable High Noon. So, it's time now to finally answer the question. What won Best Picture? The greatest show on earth. And honestly, it makes sense. The 1950s were such an unsure time for Hollywood. Look at Bob Hope's opening speech. If you listen closely, you can almost detect a note of fear. And yes, The Greatest Show is far from the greatest film, but it was the highest grossing narrative film of the year by 2 times. It's almost as if the Academy were thanking DeMille and breathing a collective sigh of relief that films could still bring in boatloads of money. More than a sign of quality, the Best Picture award should be seen as a sign of the times. And while it's easy to sit here 70 years later and complain that Rashomon should have won all the awards, it's not terribly productive. So, what's left? Honestly, a lot. We get a performance by Bob Hope, but it isn't a solo as he performs alongside Marilyn Maxwell. And at the time, this was a huge deal, as Hope and Maxwell were having a whirlwind affair. When questioned by famous gossip columnist Luella Parsons, Hope's wife Dolores said, "I don't like Bob being away so much, but I trust him absolutely. Our marriage is stronger than ever." But Hope had begun seeing Maxwell when he was 48 and she 29. And as they dance, it seems as though Hope tries his best to avoid making eye contact with Maxwell. Another big moment followed. Walt Disney came on stage to present the Song Awards. High Noon wins Best Song, with the performance by Tex Ritter being deserving in my opinion. And 10 films were nominated for Best Score, 5 in the musical category and 5 in the dramatic category, a distinction that technically still lasts today, but which hasn't been seen since 1999 and is only used in musical-heavy years. For the dramatic section, 2 new nominees appear in the religious film The Miracle of Our Lady of Fatima and The Thief, a spy thriller that was notable for its gimmick. It's completely dialogue-free. Neither one's really worth watching. For the musical category, Alfred Newman, the father of Thomas Newman and uncle of Randy Newman, won for his work on With a Song in My Heart, the biopic on singer and plane crash survivor Jane Froman. This was Newman's 5th Oscar, and he would win an unbelievable 4 of the next 5 years. By his death, Alfred received an unprecedented 45 Oscar noms. But in my opinion, this win was undeserved. There were other contenders like Michael Curtiz's remake of The Jazz Singer, which had wowed audiences in 1927 as the first film to ever feature diegetic sound.
Wait a minute. You ain't heard nothing yet. Wait a minute, I tell you. You ain't heard nothing. You want to hear Tootsie? All right, hold on.
There was The Medium, an Italian thriller and a rare foreign nomination, and then there was The Elephant in the Room. Without a doubt, the most iconic film to be nominated this ceremony, and which was shockingly sparse in its recognition. That film? Singin' in the Rain. For whatever reason, this film received only 2 nominations and won neither. If you were to poll 1,000 people on the streets, this would undoubtedly be the film nominated tonight that is most widely recognized. But its lack of recognition here is fascinating to me. For context, this would be as if 75 years from now, the most well-regarded and widely discussed film of 2022 is The Woman King. At this point, the only awards left are those above the line, a term meaning the awards for those who strongly influence the creative direction of the film. Best Director is a tight race between greats like John Huston for Moulin Rouge, C.B. DeMille for The Greatest Show, Joseph Mankiewicz for Five Fingers, and Fred Zinnemann for High Noon. But the Oscar goes to John Ford for The Quiet Man. This was his 4th win, and he made history, as winning Best Director 4 times is a feat still unmatched to this day. John Wayne accepts on Ford's behalf, who in typical Ford fashion couldn't be bothered to attend the ceremony. And in typical Wayne fashion, Wayne accepts the award only after talking highly about himself. Arrogance and ambivalence were to be expected with Wayne and Ford, and I find it perfect that such a momentous and historic win is so blasé.
Stagecoach, Long Voyage Home, She Wore a Yellow Ribbon, and many other pictures that Mr. Ford directed me in.
And then, if John Wayne hadn't made it about himself too much, Bob Hope comes in to take the thunder, complaining about how he doesn't have any Oscars yet. The ceremony was truly something else at times. Nearing the end now, we have a weird group of awards. Typically, these days, there are 2 writing awards, Best Original Screenplay and Best Adapted Screenplay, with adapted being for films like biopics, novel adaptations, and sequels. This wasn't the case in 1953, though. There are 3 writing awards, Best Motion Picture Story, Best Screenplay, and Best Story and Screenplay. But what's up with the categories here? Well, it's not as strange as it sounds. Best Screenplay is actually Best Adapted Screenplay. The Bad and the Beautiful was adapted from a George Bradshaw story, and it won the category. Five Fingers was adapted from a novel called Operation Cicero, High Noon from a John Cunningham story, The Man in the White Suit came from a play, and The Quiet Man from a Maurice Walsh story. All five of those films are fantastic, by the way. In general, the writing nominees are pretty top-notch, which I think makes sense, as one of the aspects from 50s films that have aged the best is the writing. Best Story and Screenplay is simply Best Original Screenplay. It was won by the great The Lavender Hill Mob, a really funny comedy about a bank clerk who helps his neighbor steal from the bank he works at. It also features a 21-year-old Audrey Hepburn in one of her first film roles. This is my 4th of 5 Hidden Gem recommendations. Also nominated was The Atomic City, Breaking the Sound Barrier, Viva Zapata, and Pat and Mike. Pat and Mike is a really fun comedy about an athlete, Pat, who becomes terrible at sports anytime her fiancé Mike watches. It stars Katharine Hepburn and Spencer Tracy, and if the Lavender Hill Mob weren't so smart, I think it would be worthy of the award. But what about Motion Picture Story, which went to The Greatest Show on Earth? This category would cease to continue come 1956, but it was actually pretty necessary early on. Best Motion Picture Story is a product of Hollywood's studio system, when the story of a film would be made first, often by the studio itself. So hypothetically, Paramount could have come up to C.B. DeMille with the story of a circus and 2 trapeze artists who fight to complete more dangerous stunts than the other. Then the screenplay would be written, in this case by 3 screenwriters. In that case, the screenplay would be eligible for Best Story and Screenplay. But by this point, that was already a mostly bygone concept, and so the category would be disbanded 3 years later. 4 films lost to The Greatest Show here, and 2 of them are among my favorite films of the night. There was the average Cold War film My Son John, about a mother who thinks her son may be a communist. There's the biopic on a baseball player, The Pride of St. Louis, which isn't super interesting. But then there's The Sniper, which follows a repressed man who has a hatred for women and feels personally offended by their lack of interest in him. As a way to get revenge, he starts a killing spree as a sniper, murdering them from afar. This was tense, and although it leaves a little to be desired in its ending, the story makes it worth watching alone. But even better is The Narrow Margin, my 5th and final Hidden Gem recommendation. The Narrow Margin follows a police detective aboard a train who is tasked with protecting a widow set to appear in court. The only problem, the train is full of hired assassins who aim to kill her. The story is great, but even better are the narrow angles and cramped cinematography, fully utilizing the benefits of the train set piece. It's a film that makes you feel uncomfortable and will keep you hanging on for dear life. But for now, we've reached our final train car of the night, the Acting Awards. All 4 are delivered in succession, and in my opinion, all 4 performances are deserving. There's Anthony Quinn, who wins for Viva Zapata. It's a good performance, if not a subtle one, but its subtlety is appreciated when facing off against a powerhouse performer in Marlon Brando. Quinn isn't there to accept, but his wife accepts for him in a sweet little speech. Bob Hope makes yet another joke about how he deserves an Oscar.
Those calls must be wonderful.
Gloria Graham wins Best Supporting Actress for The Bad and the Beautiful, a win most notable for the fact that she was only on screen for less than 10 minutes. At the time, it was a record for the lowest amount of screen time for an Oscar winner. Gary Cooper wins Best Actor for his role in High Noon. This is notable for 2 reasons. The first is that it's the only award The Bad and the Beautiful lost, having won everything else they were nominated for. It's phenomenal they weren't up for Best Picture. But also notable is that Cooper isn't at the ceremony to accept. So who does? John Wayne. Again, the man has held 2 statues tonight and won neither one. He also gives another speech, which is even more arrogant when you consider that nobody was giving speeches the entire night. But Wayne doesn't care about everyone else, and his speech should be remembered as one of the worst of all time. Not only does he joke about how he should fire his agents and managers for not giving himself the role Cooper just won for, but he does it in one of the most John Wayne ways imaginable, with a vague threat on their lives and a reference to his 6th sports car.
I didn't get High Noon instead of Cooper. Of course, I can't fire any of these very expensive fellas, but I can at least run my 1930 Chevrolet into one of their big black new Cadillacs.
But luckily, we end on a great note. Remember when I talked about Come Back, Little Sheba? It was one of my 5 recommended films about an older woman who marries a younger man and deals with depression and loneliness as he falls out of love with her. Shirley Booth plays Lola Delaney, the older woman in question, and the lead of the film. And honestly, I find it to be one of the best performances I've ever seen in a film. She's so poignant and poised despite dealing with so much sadness. This was Booth's first and only Academy Award, and she set history in several ways. For starters, this was Booth's film debut, and she became the first ever woman to win an acting award in her first film role, a remarkable feat that has only been matched 3 times since. She also became the final person to win an acting award after being born in the 19th century, and unless a 125-year-old bursts onto the scene soon, she might hold that record forever. She also holds the rare honor of being a Triple Crown winner, which means she has won an acting Oscar, Emmy, and Tony. Booth actually holds 2 Emmys and 3 Tonys, and although she never won an Oscar again, I'm astonished her role here is not considered among the best of all time. And to contrast John Wayne's vague threats and arrogant speech on Cooper's behalf, Booth gives one of the most genuine speeches the Academy has ever seen.
Long, long climb. I guess this is the peak. But the view has been wonderful all along the way. I want to thank my old friends for their faith, my new friends for their hope, and everyone for their charity. Thank you.
And so, there you have it. The Greatest Show on Earth wins Best Picture, and the show ends after a few special awards are given out to key innovators, including, yes, Bob Hope. It's a sweet moment, and although Hope began the ceremony moaning about how television is where films go to die, the entire broadcast ends on a hopeful note. In fact, the entire night has an air of remembering the past while anticipating the future. The Best Picture award was announced by Mary Pickford, the first huge movie star and a legend of the silent era. And when Cecil B. DeMille accepted the award for The Greatest Show on Earth, he and Pickford share a moment. Here are 2 titans of Hollywood's first 50 years, realizing that the future of filmmaking will be just fine without them. This was a rare time, when Hollywood's first generation was saying goodbye and the reins were being handed to the next. And although The Greatest Show on Earth is considered one of the weaker best films to date, it holds a special place in my mind now. These were the 25th Academy Awards, the first one to be televised, and a sign that maybe the future of the industry was brighter than once thought. Until the next time, I'll see you at the movies.